Welcome to Talking Tudors, Alana. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yes, it's lovely to have you on the show. And I thought we could start with you just saying hello to all our listeners and viewers and just telling us a little bit about you and your background.
Okay, so my name's Alana Skuse. I'm a lecturer in the English Literature Department at the University of Reading. So I'm kind of a sneaky historian because I don't actually work in the history department, but I do rather a lot of history. I've written three academic books. So one on cancer, which was my PhD topic, one on surgery and kind of altering the body, and then one that's about to come out about self-injury in Renaissance texts. And I've also quite recently released my first trade book, my kind of bookshop book, which is called The Surgeon, the Midwife, the Quack, How to Stay Alive in Renaissance England. And it's all about the kind of different medical practitioners you would get in 16th and 17th century England, what they do, and the birth of a kind of medical marketplace where you get different specialisms. So it was really fun to write.
Yes, and we are going to be talking a little bit more about your book and that kind of subject today, which is really exciting. So, when did you actually first become interested in medicine in the Renaissance world? And was there anything in particular that kind of sparked that interest?
I was doing my MA and I was very interested by that point in a lot of the Renaissance plays and things. But actually, what got me interested in medicine was something a little bit later at the turn of the 18th century. There's a lady called Sarah Cowper or Cooper who had written a diary. And if you ever get a chance to read this diary, do. It's the most fantastic kind of gossipy thing. But one of the things she kept saying in her diary was she was having this ongoing row with her husband and he was refusing to fix their carriage. And she was really afraid that the carriage was one day going to have a wheel fall off and overturn because she said, if I get a bruise, it could turn into a cancer. And I thought, okay, that's strange. And she kept talking about cancer throughout her diaries. And then she was talking about an acquaintance of hers who she thought had got cancer from her husband pushing her down the stairs. And I went to kind of look up this stuff and there was nothing there. So then that became my PhD topic and it really just kind of spiraled from there.
That's so interesting. Yeah, I've never heard anything like that. So, Sarah, did you say Sarah Cooper or Cowper?
Yeah, Cowper.
That sounds fabulous. I will have to look that up. And so tell us a little bit about what medics during the 16th century or Renaissance period actually thought about the body.
Most medics operate on the Galenic system, or what we would call the system of the humours. So it's something they inherit from Galen of Pergamon, who's an ancient Greek, and it's been kind of rumbling along. It's under the surface in medieval medicine, but in the Renaissance, with the resurgence of reading and universities and all those good things, they go back to Galen and they get really into the system of humoralism. And humoralism says that you have four humours within your body, which are physical properties. And they all circulate within your blood. It's a bit confusing because blood is also one of the humours, but the kind of blood that you see if you cut yourself, that's called nutritive blood, and all the other humours are inside that. They're on this spectrum of cold, dry, wet, hot. So you have the sanguine humour, the blood humour, which is wet and hot. You have phlegm, which is wet and cold. You have yellow bile or choler, which is hot and dry. And you have melancholy, which is dry and cold. And according to which of those predominates in your body, it will dictate pretty much everything about you, from what you look like to what your moods are like to the kind of illnesses you get. And a lot of medicine is based on trying to correct the humours. So you've got too much melancholy, you've got too much choler. Let's try and adjust various things about your lifestyle or give you different medicines in order to get those back into balance.
If a person, let's just say, got hurt in the 16th century, what could they do? Where would they go for help?
It really depends on what kind of hurt you are
Hmm.
and what kind of person you are. So the gold standard, if you are hurt externally, say you've broken your leg or something, is probably to go to a surgeon. And the surgeons are the second rung down on the ladder of the medical hierarchy. So physicians are at the top and then surgeons are underneath because surgeons don't need university degrees, but they do have to have training. They have to be apprenticed to another surgeon. And a lot of them have some kind of book learning to. If you don't have a surgeon local to you, or if you have maybe a tricky fracture, you might go to somebody called a bone setter. And a bone setter is somebody that we might call a quack now, because they're kind of itinerant. They don't do all different kinds of medical practice, they just do bones. But because they just do bones, you might be better off going to them, because all they do is go from market to market setting bones every day of the week. So they're pretty good at it.
Yeah, fabulous. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about the sort of different people practicing. And you mentioned there's some sort of formal training. It would be great to hear a little bit more about that as well.
Okay, so we have this marketplace. There's a misconception that in the Renaissance period, you have the physicians who are the proper doctors, and then everybody else is kind of quacks, just absolutely probing around in the dark. That's not really true. We have the physicians. The physicians have to have a university degree. They then have to have medical training on top of that. And they have to be, in theory, licensed by the College of Physicians. So they have about 7 years of training in all. And that makes them very expensive. And there aren't many physicians around. So they are really for the elite. The physicians also are desperately trying at all times to regulate all the other medical practitioners, with really very little success. The surgeons are the next kind of rung down on the medical ladder. As I say, they have on-the-job training. They're still kind of out of the reach of some people, but they would be accessible to the middling sort. And they charge, say, about 2 shillings for a visit, whereas the physicians rather, are charging 10 shillings. Underneath those is the apothecary trade. And these are people who've come from the medieval spicers and pepperers. So in theory, your physician gives you a prescription, you take it to the apothecary fills that prescription. In reality, the apothecary is also making their own medicines, and they're doing a bit of their own business. That's the kind of hierarchical model. But there are a lot of people operating outside of that hierarchy. There's midwives, who of course are the most important kind of care for at least 50% of the population. Midwives are an interesting case in point. They receive their training on the job, but they don't necessarily have to have any training. They're very variable in how much work they do. Some of them are just your auntie that has a lot of kids, and some of them are midwives that this is their job and they do it every day of the week. You also have all the quacks, the bone setters, the people who go from marketplace to marketplace selling things. And this is a really overlooked group, you have all the women doing medicine. And these are just women who are providing care to members of their household, their neighbors, their servants. And often they are really, really skilled. They're providing probably the majority of medical care in this period. But until quite recently, they were really overlooked because, of course, they didn't leave quite so many records.
Yeah, it's so interesting. So you mentioned obviously midwives and then sort of that informal practice of medicine that women are doing. Are they doing anything else in the world of Renaissance medicine? And also, I'd love to hear about some of the women you actually came across during your research.
Yeah, there are some fantastic women. Women are doing more in Renaissance medicine than we probably give them credit for. They're not always visible in the sources, but when they are quite strong characters. So I've read an account by a surgeon where he says that he's doing an operation. And of course, you need to hold people down for the operation because there's no anesthetic. And he's operating on this big burly man. And the man starts roaring, decides he doesn't actually want his leg cut off. And all the other helpers run away, apart from the surgeon's little son, who's there on a sort of terrible work experience. And he's only subdued because the surgeon's pregnant wife runs in from the next room and sits on the man. So these women are not to be trifled with. And we know that some surgeons' wives are filling in for their husband when the husband is away. They're training the apprentices, those kinds of things. There's also women who are just doing bits of surgery in their own right. So somebody like Lady Anne Halkett, who's active during the Civil Wars, she does a lot of what we would call domestic medicine, but she also does bits of surgery because she's quite remote and she's the only option, basically. There's also women like Elizabeth Freak, who she does domestic medicine, but we know about her because she writes these fantastic memoirs. Her memoirs are mostly about how much she hates her husband. This is quite a common theme in noble women's memoirs. And there's another lady called Hannah Woolley, who is active in the middle of the 17th century. She is another domestic healer, but her husband dies. She's got 6 kids. And so she makes her living by publishing books of domestic remedies. She's the only woman doing this. And she becomes fantastically popular. She's a bit like Martha Stewart or something, because she publishes these books and they've got bits of medicine in them, but they've also got recipes, how to get stains out of clothes, how to kind of run your household. And she is a really interesting character.
Oh, I love those books, those recipe books that have little bits of, all this incredible wisdom from the period. They're so
Yeah,
great.
all like scribbling in the margins, going, oh, this one's really good, or this didn't work. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Fantastic. And so I imagine that you came across some interesting cases like the one you said about the pregnant woman sitting on the patient. That's fabulous. Can you tell us maybe about a couple of other cases that you came across while you were writing your book?
One I came across that was quite unexpected and quite moving was the case of Mrs. Ladd, who has cancer. We don't know her first name, but she's the niece of Henry More, the philosopher. And we know about her because Henry More is writing to his great friend, Lady Anne Conway, about this case, because Lady Anne Conway has staying with her Francois van Helmont, who is a famous continental physician. And More is asking if Helmont can basically correspond with the local doctor to take care of this case of breast cancer that Mrs. Ladd has. And from the correspondence, you can piece together that Helmont is prescribing something very potent. He never says what it is, but from the symptoms that it provokes, I think it's either arsenic or mercury,
Mhm.
probably arsenic. And we have the back and forth of the correspondence where people are writing on behalf of Mrs. Ladd saying, this medicine seems to be making her worse.
Mhm.
She's got all these horrible symptoms. She's waking up in the night, salivating and crying. What should we do? And there's this negotiation of More kind of having a lot of faith in Helmont and trying to convey that to his niece, but also the niece kind of stuck between trying to put faith in the doctor and also trying to listen to her own body, which is obviously telling her that this is not working. We don't know exactly how it unfolds, but we know that the next year, More writes to Conway that he's traveling to see his niece because she's dying.
Mhm.
And that's a really interesting case to me, because we often think of doctors in this period as almost willfully ignorant or of not really caring about their patients. But what this shows is a much more typical scenario, I think, where everybody is doing their best,
Mhm.
everybody cares and is trying their best, but it's just beyond the reach of the medicine that they have at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose, there is that sort of idea, isn't there, as you've said, that this is a time where medicine is very basic, obviously, and that people aren't perhaps educated enough to be treating people. What have you found to be, or have you found that there are some common sort of misconceptions that keep coming up about medicine in this period?
We have quite a lot of misconceptions about the nature of medical practice and the idea that none of it works.
Yeah,
So I've just
yeah,
given you an example of something that doesn't work, but it's tricky to cure cancer. We're still
of
working on it.
course. Yeah.
And actually, for a lot of more minor ailments, some of what they're doing is quite effective. So, especially the domestic healers, they're using things like rosemary, sage, comfrey, chamomile, herbs that we know have an effect. And things like sage and rosemary are antibacterial. So when they're prescribing that you gargle with this, if you've got the flu, well, it actually is helping your sore throat. There's also an idea that surgeons and physicians really love bloodletting.
Yes.
And they do bloodlet all the time, but it's actually driven more by patients. It's not that physicians are just desperate to let out everyone's blood all the time. It's that patients often ask for this. It's something that really makes a lot of sense to patients, and they will treat it almost like going to the dentist. So they say, right, I'm going to have my blood let in the spring and the autumn, whether I feel like I need it or not, and that's going to help keep me healthy.
That's so interesting. I know in all the films you sort of see the bloodletting happens in absolutely
Yeah.
every film where someone's unwell. It's so interesting that you say that some things did work. I recently saw the medieval cures exhibition at Cambridge Library, and it was really interesting to see lots of the recipes. I think there was one for like wrinkles, and it had,
Mm-hmm.
one had aloe vera, and there are things that you would recognize from things that we use today, which was quite interesting. So yeah, I love that. And so, in terms of advances in medicine in this period, what would you say are some of the sort of main ones?
The main advance that we're still benefiting from is not a medicine, it's a concept. It's the concept that there should be a regulatory framework around medical practice. You have the College of Physicians, which is established in 1518. Henry VIII gives it the seal of approval, literally. Um, and from there, the physicians believe themselves to have authority over all the other practitioners. Now, in practice, the other practitioners largely do what they like, especially outside London, where there aren't so many physicians to keep an eye on them. But the principle is there. And because the physicians have this body established, then others follow suit. So you have the Company of Barber Surgeons established in 1534. Later, the apothecaries get their own body in, I think, 1619. They keep trying to make a formal body for the midwives, but the midwives quite fiercely resist this. But you at last have a system through which different kinds of practitioners can receive a fairly standard kind of training. So in London, for example, the surgeons run these herborizing, they call them herborizing weekends, kind of 4 times a year, when they'll get all the young apprentice surgeons and they take them on a trip out of town to the fields to see all the herbs and the plants that they can use in medicines. And they also have beer and cake. So these days are really popular. Um, and if a surgeon or a physician treats you badly, then you can go back to their governing body and you can raise a case against them. So it's the beginning of what we would call the medical council now, and having recourse and expecting certain things of your medical practitioner. That's really important.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And so, if people want to find out more about your work and purchase your book to find out more information, where can they go?
Anywhere you buy books, it's on Amazon, it's
Fabulous.
Waterstones. It is also in audiobook. I think it's on
Oh, great.
Spotify and Audible. Yeah.
And do you have a website, Alana, or somewhere they can?
Oh yeah, I do. It's Dr. Alanna Skuse, Dr. Alanna Skuse.co.uk. I'm also on Instagram at historian_Alana.
Fabulous. We love a good Insta account. And so I can't
Yeah.
let you go just yet. There is one more thing I do when I have guests on the show for the first time, and that is what I call 10 to go. So these are just 10 quick questions to get to know you a little bit better. So the first one is, do you have a favorite historic site that you like to visit?
I live fairly near to Hampton Court Palace, which is a real cliche, but
Oh,
it's an oldie and a goodie for a reason. I mean, it's amazing.
oh, I'm not jealous at all that you're close to Hampton Court. Love it. One of my favorite places in the world. So what about the last book that you read, or perhaps one you're currently reading?
I'm reading Anthony Delaney's new book, Queer Georgians. It's really good. It's one of those books that makes you quite jealous that you didn't write it yourself. And it's all about kind of gender identity and same sex relationships in the 18th century. Yeah, so I can recommend that.
Yeah, that sounds fabulous. And what about an ideal Sunday morning for you? What might that look like?
I have lots of animals. So my Sunday mornings tend to be not long lazy lions, but being got out of bed. My ideal Sunday morning is one where the weather is good enough to go for a walk with the dogs without being absolutely soaked.
That sounds fabulous. And what about if you had time to learn a new skill, what would you like to learn?
Oh gosh, I'd love to be better at languages.
Mm.
Yeah, it would be such a gift to have really good French or Italian, I think.
Absolutely. I know the French is on my list as well. And so, how or where do you find inspiration? If you're feeling a little uninspired, what do you do to get back into that sort of creative mode?
Actually, I find that when I go and do talks and things, the questions that people ask
Mm.
you are often really insightful and take you in directions that you wouldn't necessarily have thought of. I did a talk earlier in the year for Warwick Words Literary Festival, and somebody in the audience asked me, well, when did evidence-based medicine become a thing? And I kind of answered them as best I could at the time, and I talked about the Royal Society and so on. And then I've been thinking about this, and I think this is now my next book.
I love it.
Yeah, it's often from people who don't necessarily know that much about your subject can really view it with fresh eyes.
Yeah, that's so true. I love that. And in terms of travel, is there a destination that you haven't seen that you would like to?
A historical destination or
Oh,
just,
anywhere in general.
well, being in England at the moment, I'm really craving some hot weather. So I'd love to go to the Caribbean, somewhere like that. Um, Historically speaking, I'd love to go to Scandinavia
Oh, me too. Yeah.
and see some of the kind of old Norse and Viking stuff. That would be really cool.
Yeah, actually, quite a number of people have said that recently. So I think it's a sign from the universe that we all have to go to Scandinavia. That's how
Yeah.
I'm interpreting it anyway. And so is there a person that you find inspiring? This doesn't have to be, this could be a historic person or it could be a contemporary person, just someone that inspires you that you might be able to share with us.
I'm going to say I'm quite inspired in a weird way by Sarah Cooper, that lady that I talked about who has the
Yeah.
diary, because she has a difficult hand in life. I mean, she's a noble woman, so from that point of view, she's got an advantage, but she has this like turbulent personal life. But she just keeps on keeping
Mm.
on. She is such a tough cookie. She's in her 60s. She's basically bedbound. She's blind in one eye and she's got a bad tooth and she just pulls out her own tooth. She is hard as nails. So yeah, if I'm in a tight spot, you can think, what would Sarah Cooper do? Well, probably complain a lot and then get on with it.
Oh, I love that. I do find women from history so inspiring, I have to say. So courageous, so clever, so lots of things. So, yeah, I love that. And what about when you were a child? What did you want to be when you were older? Was there a sort of dream job that you had in mind?
I wanted to be something to do with animals. So I wanted to be a vet for a little while. Then I wanted to breed horses. And somebody said to me, don't work with animals because you won't get to enjoy them.
Oh,
Um, and I think there was some truth in that. So now I work with history, and I just have the animals on the side so that I can enjoy them. But we were there's a kind of meme going around Instagram at the moment of everybody had either an ancient Greeks, ancient Egyptians, or Tudors phase as a child. Me and my brother were very into the ancient Egyptians and the Tudors, and my brother went and got a PhD in ancient history, and I got
oh,
one in Renaissance. So that really worked out for us.
oh, I love that. And just out of curiosity, what animals do you have?
I've got a horse and two dogs.
A horse. Wow. Oh, I'd love to have
Yeah,
a horse. Oh, that's amazing.
seem to spend most of my life paying vet bills.
Oh, yeah. So
Yeah.
so you've got somewhere to keep the horse, or does the horse live somewhere else and you go
The
and
horse
visit?
lives somewhere else.
Yeah.
He
Okay.
lives about 10 minutes up the road with a lot of other horses.
Oh, lovely. Love it.
Yeah,
And what do you like to do to relax and unwind?
I'm very bad at relaxing. Uh, I sometimes I get really tired and I go, right, this weekend I'm going to
Yeah.
relax. And my husband kind of walks into a room and he goes, are you doing it yet? Are you doing the
Are you
relaxing?
relaxing?
Yeah.
Oh, dear.
But when I manage it, I like to do the things most people like to do, I guess. I like to read. I go and do agility classes with my
Oh,
younger dog, where they jump over the jumps and things. And I
okay.
find that's very relaxing because I'm so bad at it that I literally can't think of anything else while I'm doing it.
Yeah.
I can't possibly be thinking about my book while I'm trying to do the agility because I would just fall over. So that's really good as a kind of complete distraction.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. Today I did the ironing to relax, Alana, so that tells you that I'm struggling as well. I was like, oh yeah, I'll iron just to stop thinking for a moment. Didn't really
Now, I
work, but
used to
anyway.
iron when I was a student. I think I was the only student who ever had iron sheets, but it was
Iron
very much the
sheets.
same thing.
Yeah, it is. It's just something to just, for a moment, stop those
Yeah.
thoughts. And very last question is the Tudor takeaway. So I do ask all my guests for a takeaway, something for our listeners to go off and explore after the episodes. Do you have a takeaway for us?
Yeah, the takeaway is something I recommended to a student yesterday, actually. Uh, it's a series of lectures by Professor Emma Smith, who is at Oxford, I think. And they are a series on Shakespeare plays and a series called Not Shakespeare. They're just recorded lectures, but they're really interesting and accessible. I go back to them whenever I have to teach those texts, stick my headphones in on the dog walk and be listening to something about King Lear or whatever. And yeah, I've recommended them to loads of students over the years, and they've all seemed to enjoy them.
That's fabulous. Did you say Emma Smith? Was it Emma?
Yeah,
Emma.
yes.
Oh, wonderful. And you know what? We've never had that takeaway before in, almost a few hundred episodes. So that is
Yeah, they're
fantastic.
like 10 years old, these lectures, but they're really good.
Oh, I love it. All right. So I will add the link to those lectures to our show notes, as well as to your website and Instagram account. Alana, it's been so lovely to meet you and talk with you about this really fascinating subject. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It was really fun.